Hey everyone, it's Trafotin. I'm back again to talk to you guys about universal packages. I've spent at least multiple videos complaining and talking about all the technical jargon, but who cares about all of this technical jargon and the mindset we need to have? We're going to talk about the usability, and we're going to be getting deep into how to use Flatpaks, the things and the permissions that actually matter. Obviously, this goes without introduction to say, what are Flatpaks? Now, I've covered this in previous videos before, so I'll give a quick recap, okay? Flatpaks are universal packages. They're universal, meaning they work everywhere, regardless of what kind of distribution you use. They don't require any specific dependencies except for OS tree, which is completely distro agnostic. It doesn't require on things like AppArmor. It doesn't require things like Fuse. It just works. Flatpaks don't collect any telemetry like snaps. They let you host your own repositories for free, I might add. They don't require root privileges. They don't require that you have to set up your permissions in the terminal in a really weird way. They also integrate with your desktop perfectly fine, unlike app images and snaps. Flatpaks also provide a very powerful permission access system, which controls exactly what each program is allowed to access. I've said before that Flatpaks aren't perfect, but let me drill this into your head. Some sandboxing is better than nothing at all. So while we have nothing, let's get ourselves something. So naturally, of course, you want to go and download your Flatpaks. That's all right, I got you covered. First, you go to flathub.org, and then you click the button that says Set up Flathub, and then you can follow the instructions to download Flatpak on your Linux distribution, and Flatpaks on many different Linux distributions from this massive list here. And this will set up Flatpak for you, allowing you to get access to a whole suite of commands that are pretty much all based off of Red Hat package managers. You can do update to update the repositories, you can upgrade to run your software updates, you can install to install your programs, you can remove to uninstall your programs, you can search to search something in Flatpaks, and uninstall -- unused to remove any unused dependencies that are no longer needed in your system. But there are situations where you might want to consider not to use them. And here's actually a few valid reasons I've actually dug up. The first is if the application on FlatHub isn't being very well maintained or has never received an update to match upstream in a reasonable amount of time. For example, one package on the FlatHub that I could never recommend to anyone is an insanely old copy of Adobe Reader. Yes, Adobe packaged Adobe Reader natively as a dev package for Ubuntu. It works on 64-bit systems because Flatpak is able to emulate multiple architectures, including 32-bit libraries and software. The problem with this is Adobe abandoned this project 11 years ago. And I could never recommend anyone use this, especially when we are over a decade later and Adobe Reader has received so many security flaws and problems that they just need to be addressed. And you're basically using this thing at your own risk. Just use a virtual machine of Windows with Adobe Reader. It's not hard if you really need it. The other problem with this package is that it's unofficial, and that gets us into the topic of unofficial packages. Flatpaks have actually made a new verification system, and it's actually pretty simple and pretty reliable, where developers can either link their GitHub or GitLab pages or their Codeberg page or whatever to FlatHub, but also they can go and be manually reviewed by FlatHub's moderators, or it's listed directly on the official project's website, which basically means that whenever you see an application on FlatHub with a blue check mark, that you know you can trust it because it comes from the original developer, and no, they don't have to pay $8 for it unlike other platforms. In these scenarios, you should go and view the build manifests right from the link on the middle of the page. So you can go and verify and see what's happening. Now, because of all the manual verification and review in order to get into FlatHub in the first place, and a lot of new automated vetting processes which have been promised to be implemented into FlatHub, the chances of anything malicious are pretty unlikely, especially since the entire ecosystem is open. But just like third-party repositories like the AUR, Fedora's Copper, Ubuntu's PPAs, we need to be very careful and read the code, because there's a chance that something slips through the cracks. And if you can't read the code, look at how many people have actually submitted issues about the package, and look to see, do developers update the package frequently along with the upstream program? Do people submit issues and complain about problems all the time, and do those problems actually get addressed? How many people have actually starred? And this is probably the weakest one, but you know, odds are, even with this, you will probably be fine, because many Flatpak manifests are actually built using other types of packages, which are just basically disassembled and installed as Flatpak packages. Because now that we've decided on all the packages that we want to install, the last thing we need to do is we need to double check our packages permissions using something like FlatSeal. Since my last video, FlatSeal is now in GTK4. So for all of the people who are using GNOME-based distributions, or you're using something like a tiling window manager, FlatSeal gives you great access to controlling all of the FlatHub overrides using a GUI program. But if you're using KDE, KDE has built an front end identical to FlatSeal, but it's directly built into the settings menu as long as you're using an up-to-date and current version of KDE. Which you should, of course, because you need to be using a rolling release distribution, and I hate to sound like a broken record, because using a rolling release distribution means you are more liable to get security patches faster than stable release distributions. I'm actually going to highlight a few permissions here because some of the permissions might be confusing and overwhelming, and I'm going to simplify a little bit on how they work. Now, if you don't want to use something like FlatSeal or KDE's control panel, you do have access to things like the command line, where you can actually create overrides files. And these overrides files are actually placed in your .local share Flatpak overrides folder, and here is where you're going to create all of these overrides, and this is actually where FlatSeal and KDE write your permissions to. Now, the first permission, of course, that everyone should be suspect to is the network permission. You might see, if you use something like LibreOffice or GNOME Calculator, they connect to the internet. And why does LibreOffice connect to the internet, you might ask? Well, LibreOffice has to connect to the internet to download documentation. And this also has a lot of great implications for privacy as well, because a common thing that I'm seeing online is a lot of people are still frustrated with the telemetry situation from Muse Group on MuseScore and Audacity. They're adding Yandex and Google Analytics. All you have to do is kill the internet for these applications. And you might say, well, you can't trust these programs anyway. Well, if you use the networking permission itself cannot be bypassed. So yes, while they could pass a command outside of the Flatpak sandbox to your system, they can't just turn on the network through the sandbox. And this is an important thing, because this way, you know, when you kill the internet for a specific application, you know it is off. Next, we're going to talk about interprocess communications, or IPC. Interprocess communications is actually a namespace in the Linux kernel, which actually allows for shared memory between two processes. Now, as a result, if you can get away with not including this permission, you should turn this permission off. And the reason why I bring this up is because this permission is actually necessary if you use X11. But as we all know, guys, we shouldn't be using X11. We need to be using Wayland, because Wayland is the future of the Linux desktop compositing and display management. So don't use X11 and don't use interprocess communications if you can help it. And as Wayland is the future, we cannot allow our programs to fall back on X11, because X11 is legacy technology that we need to avoid. And you'll actually notice that fallback on X11 is a default on a ton of Flatpaks, because there are programs like, say, KeyPass XC or LibreOffice that still fall back on using X11. And you might say, well, they natively support Waylands, but why are they have an X11 fallback? The reason is because we're still dragging our feet on people using X11, and as a result, if the person isn't using Wayland, they are going to be using X11. To prevent even the chance of a rogue X server even opening, we need to kill all access to X11. For example, I know that Mindtest doesn't support Wayland. I am going to need to use the fallback to X11. But I know, for example, the music player Amberall does natively support Wayland, so I don't need to use the X11 fallback. Pulseaudio. Pulseaudio has been a curse on the Linux desktop for years, but not only is it a curse in terms of it being incredibly big and unnecessary and unsandboxed when you're not using something like Pipewire, Pulseaudio will grant your Flatpak access to your microphones or to play audio on your system. Applications that don't need to play audio, like for example Krita, why does Krita need access to my audio? Well guys, Krita is an animation tool, but I don't use Krita for animation, I only use Krita for drawing. As a result, what I did was I turned off Pulseaudio because I don't need to have Krita get access to my audio server all the time. We also have device equals all, and this is where devices are able to access external devices like say USB webcams, security keys, microphones, or your PCI buses, and this is where you actually want to go and limit these things. Now, if you're using like a video calling program, like say for example, you have a lot of encrypted messaging programs like me, like Element and Signal, and Element and Signal will need to gain access to my microphone and my webcam because I frequently have video calls with them. So as a result, with these applications, I have device equals all on, but on applications that don't require this, you should leave this off. The most complicated one on this list is probably the file system permissions. Well, I should just always make my Flatpak so that they have access to all of my user files, or all of my system files, or all of my libraries or configuration files. Instead, I want to encourage you to figure out which folders actually are needed first, rather than just globally enabling all permissions. Now, I understand there are some programs which probably do need access to all of these system files, but instead, I want to encourage that we operate on a whitelist basis. If you just have these good practices in mind, you can basically take Flatpaks to the next level, because you could say, well, there's no way as a normal person, I'm not going to be highly targeted. I don't need to do these things. Well, the thing is, you might need to do these things, because if you don't know these things, what if you encounter a Flatpak which is broken? Because sometimes the permissions in Flatpaks change and you realize a Flatpak might need permissions it didn't initially have. I'd like to say I hate preaching to the choir, but as we all know, guys, on YouTube, them choir like to be preached to. But I want to present these as this is the way to use Flatpaks, because this is how we're going to push Flatpaks to be better and push other developers to be better. We need to know all of these permissions, because of all of these permissions, we can know how Flatpaks function, and we can make them more functional in the event that they aren't. And because of this robust permission system, this is why we need to accept that Flatpaks will be our future, while we eagerly await for a real sandboxing solution at a higher level in the future. But until then, we need to use Flatpaks and hold our ground. Install everything you possibly can as a Flatpak. So go in knowing how to use it, with all these permissions in mind, and you will be prepared when that time comes. But it's that time of the video, guys, and it's time for me to tell you to smash that like button. Smash that like button if you want to see more information about FlatHub's new donation system. I am also excited to announce that the channel is now fully sustainable. I am currently making $27 on Patreon, which is just enough to cover my expenses. And plus a little more, which is awesome. And I really want to say thank you so much for everyone who has gotten me this far. Because I also want to say I am not going to beg you for money. Instead, I'm going to beg you for help, which is a sort of different matter altogether. If anyone knows anything about, considering you've made it this far for such a nerdy video, if you know anything about Fedora CoreOS, Trafotin, or Podman, please let me know. I am trying to figure out how to deploy a website using Podman, and I will take any help I can get, including abusing the help of my subscriber base. Thank you for watching. I will see you guys later. Have a great rest of your week.